Hello everybody. I wanted to go over the Project 5 with lessons 23, 24, and 25 and just go over how to work these problems that we're going to be doing. Alright, so let's look at the first part. So the first part is using two slopes to find a point on the slope. So when we talk about slopes, there's a couple things you need to think of. Think of the word rise over run, and that's having to do with slope, okay? And slope is a change in y over the change in x. So when you try to find the slope, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to try to start with your leftmost point and then move to your right point so that you can see where you're going. So for example, I count how many I go down to right here, okay? And so I'm going down 2. Then I count how many do I go over, okay? And if you count over, that's 4, okay? So now we have to write that as rise over run. Now rise is up and down, and run is left and right. So even though it says rise, it could be going down too. So now when we think about going down, do you think that's going to be a negative value or a positive value if you're going down? And it's going to be a negative. So you could write this as -2/4. But we can reduce that still, meaning we can simplify this fraction. 2/4 can be reduced if you divide each one by 2. And when you do that, you end up getting -1/2. So that would be your slope. So again, count from the leftmost point, go over to the right. If it's down and over, it's going to be a negative slope. If it's up and over, like if I draw a line like this would be a positive slope, okay? And you would have a positive answer. But you can write it as a fraction, just doing your rise and run, rise over run. Okay, now, step 2, when it says find the slope of a line passing through the points, and this will be this slide and the next slide, it'll be all using the same formula. This is where you use the slope formula, which says that m is equal to, and m, member, stands for slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so there's the formula that we're going to use, okay, to figure out our slope of these 2 points. Now what you do is you label the 4, -2, and the 6, -4 with the x1, y1, x2, y2. And so I'll start with just the first point, and I'll label it x1, y1, and then x2, y2. So you start with one point, x1, y1, the other point, x2, y2. Now we can plug it into this formula. So it says y2 minus y1. Okay, well, y2 minus y1, that's going to end up being -4 minus, now it says y1 is -2. So that is still, it still says minus because that's in the formula, but this time we're using a -2, so we have to put that -2 there. Over, and then I go to this one, x2, which is going to be 6, minus, and then we have our x1 is 4. Okay, so now what happens when I get to my double negatives? What happens on that? 2 negatives in a row is going to turn into a positive. And so when we do this, it's going to be -4 plus 2, okay, -4 plus 2, which ends up being -2. And then the other one, 6 minus 4, which is 2. So again, we see if we can simplify this answer. Well, -2 over 2, 2 divides into 2 one time. So your answer is -1, or -1 over 1. It doesn't really matter how you write it. if you write it as a fraction or not. So that's how you do it when you're given 2 points, not on a graph. Okay, so let's move on and let's look at how to do it another way. So this one is on 24. It's talking about slopes with 0 or undefined. And so I want to just tell you real quick what 0 and undefined are. Okay, so 0 is going to be a horizontal line like this. This would be a 0 slope. Obviously, it'd be a straight line. And then undefined, so that's 0 slope. And undefined would be a horizontal up and down line. Undefined, okay? So now, using those two, what we're going to do is we're going to, again, use the slope formula. So I'm going to write this up here. So to remind you guys, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So it's still the same formula. And then we get to our points, and remember what we do again to our points? Now we label them. So we say this one is x1, y1, and x2, y2. So once we have them labeled, then we can just plug in the numbers where it's supposed to be. It's not a very good y, but anyways, we'll start with our y2, which is 3, minus our y1, which is 3, over our x2, which is 4, minus our x1. Well, again, it's a negative 2, so we put minus negative. And then let's think, okay? Again, what happens when we have 2 negatives in a row? Turns into a positive. So then when you solve that, 3 minus 3 is 0. 4 plus 2 is 6. So it's 0 over 6, which is just 0. Because 6 divided by, 6 times 0 is 0. Anything times 0 is 0. So if you have 0 over any number, that's going to be your answer. So this is going to be the horizontal flat line. So, he was going mountain biking, and he traveled, he was at the base of the mountain. So that's why it has no slope, because it was the base of the mountain. He wasn't climbing up it. Now the next one says, Kristen is climbing and goes from points 4, -5 to 8, -4. Find the slope. So in this case, again, we're going to do our x1, y1, x2, y2. And then plug it into our formula. So we'll start with our y2. 4 minus y1 is -5. And then our x2, 8 minus x1 is 4. Oh, no. Yeah, 8 minus 4, sorry. Okay, so again, when we have the double negative, it's going to turn into a positive. So 4 plus 5 is 9. And then 8 minus 4 is 4. Now let's see, can we reduce that? Is there anything that goes into both 9 and 4? Nope. So that would be your slope. So this one would be 9 over 4. And then this one, again, was 0. That was your answer. Okay, let's try the last one. As Kristen is walking up the mountain, she gets to a section where she has to rock climb. She goes from the points 5, 7 to 5, -3. Find the slope. So, let's look at this. So, again, we've got to label our points. x1, y1, x2, y2. Then what we're going to do is plug in the formula. -3 minus 7 over, and then the other one is going to be 5 minus 5. Okay, so negative 3 minus 7, that's negative 10. And then 5 minus 5 is 0. So this time we're going 0 divided by 10. Now think about it. 0 divided by anything, well, 0 times anything is 0. 0 times 10 or 0 times 5 or whatever is still 0. So there's no way 0 can go into negative 10 or any other number. So this is what's called undefined. Oops, spelling that wrong, sorry. Undefined. Because you cannot divide it unevenly. And again, I think of like slopes. You know, you're walking up a hill, that's a positive slope. You're walking down a hill, that's a negative slope. Undefined, or 0 is like a flat surface, and then undefined is like walking up a wall. You can't really do that unless you're Spider-Man, but I don't think many of us are Spider-Man, so we're going to just say we can't do that. All right. There's one more part that we're going to do. Okay. Next part we're going to do is we're going to look at our lesson 25. You're renting a U-Haul truck that has a flat rate of $30 plus $60 per mile. Write an equation that you could use to find the cost of the U-Haul. Okay, so this time we're going to write an equation, and this is a good example of something you see in the real world. When I was moving last, that's what they did, is they charge you a flat fee, and then they also charge you per mile when you rent the big trucks that you have to do. And so this is kind of what you would do to figure out how much it would be, about your estimate would be. Okay, so then what you do is you start with y. We'll just say y is our total. Doesn't really matter what variable you start with. It might tell you to do whatever. But so it's 60 cents per mile, if you notice that. Per mile means that's going to be, whenever it says per, that's going to be something that's going to be by a variable. Because it's saying per, like per minute, per hour, miles per hour, this or that. So in this case, 60 cents per mile, that means that's how much they're charging you each mile. So that has to be a, one that has a variable with it. So I'd say 0.60 x, and then $30 is the flat rate, so that's plus 30. Technically, you could say 30 plus 0.60, that would be fine, 60x. But remember, the variable has to be by the 60 because it's per mile that you're getting that. Okay, so it depends on how many miles you drive is how much more you pay per mile. So you use the equation to figure out how much 40 miles would be. So now that we have this equation, this is our answer. Okay, we use this for this next problem to figure out how much 40 would be. So where do you think we'd plug 40 into? Do you think we'd plug it in for y or for x? Yeah, we want to plug it in for x. So we're going to say y equals 0.6d times 40 plus 30. Well, when you think about it, 0.6 or 6 times 4 is 24. We're just going to add a 0 onto that, but move the decimal over. So this, if it was 6 times 40, it'd be 240. But this, in this case, we're going to move the decimal over 1, so it's actually going to be $24 plus $30 to get our total. So 24 plus 30, that's going to be 54. So that's how much dollars 40 miles would be. Okay, so the more miles you go, the more you pay, which makes sense. Finally, it says use the equation from number 1 to find out how many miles the U-Haul truck was driven if the cost was $40 or $45. So this time they're giving us the total, the cost. So which variable do you think we would plug it in for this time, the y or the x? Yeah, the y. So we're going to go, 45 is actually going to be the same as y for this one. So I'm going to say 45 equals 0.60x plus 30. So we're trying to solve for x because we're trying to figure out how many miles they drove. Okay, so the next step we would do is, to solve the equation is subtract your 30 from each side. Subtract 30, subtract 30. And for space reasons, I'm just going to put this over in a different spot. So 45 minus 30, that cancels out. 45 minus 30 is going to be 15. So you get 15 equals 0.60x. Okay? Now we need to solve for x. So what we have to do is the final step, whenever it says something next to the variable, we divide by that number. So we're going to divide by 0.60. So I'm going to divide by 0.60, divide by 0.6. Okay? And then when I do that, 15 divided by 0.6 is going to be 25. So my answer will be, it is 25 miles that you drove to get, oops, sorry, this is getting cut off a little bit. So I'll put it over here. X is 25 miles. And that's your answer. So again, when it gives you the total, you plug that into the total and you do it the opposite way to find what x is. So that's how we solve this problem. All right? So hopefully this helps you on your project.